Hello, friends. It's Easter. And first of all, I hope you're having a wonderful, blessed Easter and really just rejoicing in what Christ has done for all of us who are believers today. It's a day that we can't take too seriously. It's a day that we should be celebrating every Sunday. That's the reason we worship on Sundays, because of what God did through Christ on this Easter Sunday. So, my prayer for you is you're able to focus first on Christ. There are a lot of distractions, but my prayer is that it starts with Christ. Our chapter of the day today seems kind of disconnected from Easter, but it's really not. 2 Kings chapter 2. And 2 Kings chapter 2 is the very end of David's life and the very beginning of Solomon's reign. And it starts with David's charge to Solomon. It starts like this. When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth, he said, so be strong, act like a man. What great advice. And we might think, sometimes we read this stuff in Scripture and we think, oh, that's a nice generality, though not much really is going to come of David saying that. But oh, did a lot come of David saying, be strong, act like a man. Because as soon as David finished sort of this general encouragement, we then see David list kind of his enemies, the people that did him wrong, but he didn't finish off during his life. And he's kind of laying it on Solomon to say, hey, there's some paying back to be done. And, if you want to establish your kingdom and if you want to vanquish your enemies, you got some people that you need to clear out. And he lists quite a few people. And, you look at who David lists and then you kind of see there's this guy named Benaiah that just goes around killing people for David. So keep an eye on that guy. Because he does a lot of damage. Kind of an misunderstood character in Scripture, but he's out there kind of the avenger on behalf of Solomon and on behalf of the line of David. But the part I found most interesting today was this thing that happens with Bathsheba. So we hear from this guy named Adonijah, and we might forget that Adonijah is another one of David's sons. So Adonijah is Solomon's half-brother. And we read in verse 13, Adonijah comes to Bathsheba and asks him for a favor. In verse 17, what's the favor? Please ask King Solomon to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. And Bathsheba says, okay, I'll go ask him. And Bathsheba goes and asks Solomon, hey, can your brother marry, what's her name? Can your brother marry this lady? And Solomon, you'd think, well, what do I care if you marry Abishag the Shunammite? But Solomon has a very forceful negative response to this, and it makes us wonder, who is this person? Why does it matter if someone marries Abishag the Shunammite? Well, if we go back a chapter, we meet Abishag the Shunammite in 1 Kings chapter 1, and here's where we meet her. Now King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. Therefore his servants said to him, let a young woman be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be in his service. Let her lie in your arms, that the lord my king may be warm. So they sought for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel, and found Abishag the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not. So, to summarize and translate, this person's job, Abishag the Shunammite, was a beautiful young woman whose job it was to sit in King David's lap and keep him warm because he was old and cold. Which leads us back to the question, who cares if Solomon's half-brother wants to marry this girl? He probably saw her around the palace and thought, all right. Well, the problem is, as you can remember with Absalom's rebellion, when Absalom was trying to take over Israel or take the throne from David, what's the first thing that he did? He went and slept with all of David's concubines and sort of marked his territory, as it were. And Solomon sees that that's what his half-brother is trying to do. So he immediately and negatively responds to his mother and says, "No way, no how is my half brother going to marry her." And on and on this goes with people challenging his throne, and Solomon wisely, although very violently, but definitively defending his throne from all these early attacks. And the last verse of the chapter, then the king gave the order to Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. Different guy, priest who wronged Solomon and David. The last thing it says is the kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. And that's what this chapter is about. It's about Solomon establishing his kingdom, doing the dirty work that he needed to do so that he could reign and reign in peace. Because the big thing that separated Solomon's reign from David's reign was peace. David was always at war. And that's why God didn't have David build the temple. He had Solomon build the temple. Despite this very violent start, Solomon was a king who governed over peace for the most part. And that's how it connects to Easter. Because here we have Jesus just coming out of this turbulent end of his earthly life and ministry. He's been executed. All of his disciples have walked away from him, at least temporarily. All the religious leaders are against him. And here comes Jesus triumphantly out of the grave on Easter and begins everything. Begins the new reality for the church and for those who had ears to hear. So just like David and Solomon established their kingdom in this way 1,000 years before, Jesus established his kingdom at Easter. And all of this, everything in the Old Testament, points to him and points to that event because that is the center of the gospel. And the gospel is the center of everything. So those are my thoughts on 2 Kings chapter 2. I would obviously appreciate any thoughts, questions, or comments. Have a great Easter, and may it be centered on Christ.